In this video, we're going to talk a little bit more about some other tools available to us with Meshmixer. One of which, that's quick and easy, is the shaders tool. And this basically controls how the material looks to you. Now you'll notice that we've kind of been spinning around, it has this kind of reflective metallic, which some people like that while they're working. It doesn't have anything to do with the realistic model, so it doesn't really matter. But you can change that from whatever it is to another one by just grabbing one of the representations and dragging it over. And you can see make the change there. So it's just a visual aid. I like a little bit more of a dull clay-like look because it seems a little bit easier to just kind of see what you're doing and to see little errors that might be popping up than that metallic color. But you can do whatever you want to on that. Other tools that are available to us, and I'm going to probably need to, well, I might even look at this one right off the bat. The export tool allows you to export your file out as different file types, object formats, PLY, AMFs, STLs of course, and that's just essentially creating a file output of what you're doing, similar to the export in just about every other type of program out there. So that's one feature. Now, the next feature I want to take a look at, and we'll have to definitely readjust my screen a little bit, and maybe move my camera adjustment. If I can, just a little bit right over here. There we go. We want to take a look at our print button down at the bottom. So the print button being created, or being shown now, pulls us into this menu. And now we've got a whole new look of things. First of all, it is setting itself up for what type of printer you have in your choices, in your options. So first thing I want to do is we'll come at the top and choose a printer that I may have. And look, you've got all kinds of printers to pick from. Most of which are sort of aligned with Autodesk right now, MakerBot obviously, MakerBot 5th generation. They do add more, so in even Sculpteo and iMaterialize and that kind of thing. But depending on what you may have access to. So one of the common ones that we use in our lab is the 2X. The 5th generation is also available to us. And all it really does is it tells the computer it's setting up for the creation of our part. And there's one thing that's different you need to understand between the 2X and the 5th generation, or even the 2, is material choices. The 2X only works in ABS or ABS-like materials, not PLA. The 5th generation and the 2 are designed for PLA applications, where they have some extra fans to make it all possible. Now the Replicator Dual is actually an older version, which can do PLA and ABS. We'll stick for now with the 5th generation. That works pretty well for us. And we have one feature set in place. Now, we have a lot of other features that we can see here to get a feel with, and I'm going to show you the interfaces with the other software later on so that you're familiar with it, but this is at least a starting point. A couple of typical things that will happen with most software is it's going to show you sort of what's considered the front, and this box that you see represents the build area. Now, we have several features still here. We have our transform features, we have our ability to move, we have our ability to relocate the little fella on the build plate, which is not always a good choice, too much, because it usually puts it in a good place when it first gets here. We have the ability to change its size or scale by grabbing and, well, not rotating, don't want to really rotate. It's actually going for the scaling factors. There we go. Scale on the Z, scale on the X, or of course scale uniformly. Now I'm going to be honest, one of the reasons I don't like to use the Meshmixer version of this is because it's too much design. Usually when we get to this stage we don't need to be making design changes like what I'm doing right now. We need to be making simple changes like barely scale it up as a uniform or not. Does have the ability to fit the build volume, which will scale it up to fit it in the full size of the space that you have and make a really, really funky creation. It does allow you to change the units based on what you made it as, but we like to stick to the metric to begin with, so we probably won't do all that. And of course it does allow us to rotate. And the rotation may or may not be good for us. because we wouldn't really want to print it this way. See if I can get it positioned back where it needs to go. There we go. And we definitely wouldn't want to rotate a lot of other directions. But we might consider, though, rotating it this way, just to make it fit in the build space just a wee bit more. Like that. Sometimes you got to do those kind of changes. Now, got a little slider tool. It's going to take me on down for more features. First of all, we have our analysis tools that we have. We have our stability and our slicing and those kind of features. We can take a look at our slicing again. And, you know, we have some issues that's showing up for us. Strength, still going to give us the areas in question doesn't like. And stability shows us where the center of gravity is. Now, we move on down our list here, and we have the model has been repaired, and we have hollow wall thickness, and it's important that you understand what it's interpreting as wall thickness. And it means the inside is going to be not a solid thing, it's going to be hollow, but how thick do you want your wall to be? Do you want it to be 1 millimeter? Do you want to make other adjustments? And this is actually a pretty good feature. I can click on that, and it's going to process through and make the thing hollow, but also create a wall thickness of 0.1. That can be pretty good. Now, it's gone ahead and done that little nonsense and given me that version. It's giving me a hidden line version of my creation, and you can literally see the wall thickness it's going to build in. Now, that may or may not be a good thing for me. I'm going to uncheck that. I'll tell you one thing that might be really useful for me is to thicken thin parts by a certain value. So I'm going to click that, let it run. And this is where it would actually thicken up things that it considers too thin. And that is a really handy feature. Okay. And we can always click on the Add Support Structure. And we have our same settings that we did on the previous one. I'll just go ahead and say Support Overhangs. And let's see what happens. Again, there's so many settings with this software. You can do so much with it. You can almost get lost in settings. So it's important that you don't worry too much about using a lot of these settings at this point in time. You just want to kind of be aware they're there, and maybe some point in time down the road, if you're dealing with something or can't get something to work just right, you're thinking, oh, I'll go check that out and see if that'll help me. So right now we want to stick with the basics and not get caught up with all the options, because the options can really start to bog you down over time. Alright, let's see what we have here. Ooh. Now you'll notice that the settings for the actual support material in this case are different. Well, I won't say different, but look how small they are compared to when we previously did it. You have to keep in mind that I have scaled my object up to where it's almost fitting the entire build volume, so it's way bigger than it used to be. So these settings actually are still fine. They're just based on what we used to have. My part is just really big, and so now the story of supporting it has changed a lot. If my part was down to the original size that I originally had it at, the support material would look more realistic. We'll tell it to remove all those though. And done. Now, that brings us to kind of the end of our tools. And you see at the very bottom, just barely, let me see if I can grab my screen just a little bit, you can say send to Makerware. Now, here's the ironic thing about all this. All this does is it's going to turn around and send this to a program that already is in existence that's going to run some of it anyway. So all it's done is pulled up the slicing program that's attached to the particular printer in question and said, here you go. So that's one reason I don't really worry too much about using Meshmixer in getting a lot of these settings done, because I'm pretty much going to have to do a lot of it in the other program anyway. The support material is nice because the support material is very different in Meshmixer than it is like Makerware, so that's a neat little thing. But you know, doing this doesn't do us a whole lot of good, to be honest with you. So you know, I'm going to exit that back in this mode. So as you can see, kind of what we're doing here is taking a look at print in general, and you get some of those features, get some of the concepts, but when we look at it in the other software, you're going to see essentially the same thing. You do have the ability to change some colors. We didn't take a look at that, but it's cool, and you can also choose different types of material. But again, it doesn't really matter what you choose here, because you're going to have to choose it again in whatever slicing program that has the final say. Okay, but it is cool to kind of see it in the broad sense. All right. Well, I don't really have a lot for you on that one. You can just take a look at the shaders and the print option there too, and of course export is just a normal export, so we won't spend much time on that, but hopefully you've had a little fun with this and learned a lot about Meshmixer. So go and enjoy and create some cool stuff with Meshmixer. We'll talk to you later.